Hey everyone! Today we're going to talk about innovating the fast moving consumer goods industry. Welcome to Invincible Innovation Live Show. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm Adima Zolcario, Innovation and Value Creation Expert, and I'll be your host. And today with me, I have a very special guest. Hello. Hi, Misha.
Hey, Eddie, thanks for
Hey.
having me.
Sure. Misha de Sterke, Senior
Yes,
Partner at InnoLeap.
correct.
So we're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and you're so invited to join the discussion and ask questions. And we'd love to hear what you're thinking. And now we can start. I'll start with a very general question, but I always ask something which is like, we need to start from something which is like everybody's asking that. It seems that all companies need to innovate. So, what is the most and biggest obstacle for innovation?
The company itself. So, what is interesting is that innovation is a broad term, and I always make a distinction in, let's say, more incremental and efficiency innovations, adjacent and disruptive. And therefore, to specify the type of innovation that we work on creates a bit more clarity on, what's the challenge for corporations. And the challenge is that, in essence, when we talk about FMCG companies, in this case, they have a lot of smart people around product knowledge, about branding. So they are well equipped to run, I would say, incremental innovations. Can we launch a new taste of a product? Can we launch a new pack? I still think we can speed that process up, but in general, they are equipped to work on that piece. Now, the tough cookie is at what if your existing category is declining in sales? So, yeah, the product in itself is not the only reason why people leave and go for a next or for a new product, right? So it becomes more around disruptive innovations. But we also need to specify that term, by the way. Some clients talk about beyond the core business innovations. So everybody has sort of their own terminology to talk about. So what's actually the new wave of products and services that we need to launch to retain the customer? Now, and when it comes to disruptive innovations, the biggest obstacle is the way the company is organized to make money at that moment. So
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
long question for a short, a
Mhm.
long answer for a short question.
Yeah.
When it comes to disruptive innovations, the organization itself is the biggest problem, and how they are organized to make money.
So they're doing what is the default processes of like doing things which are the market needs a new taste, a new like small I know maybe change the product a bit or
Yeah.
package it differently, but they're not thinking really out of the box, like really into a new category, into something that they never created, and into a new industry maybe.
Yeah. Nou ja, and imagine this situation, Eddie, is that we know, for example, in the food business with all these documentaries about Seaspiracy and Game Changer,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, I know this one.
right? So there's a big
Yeah.
understanding in general, I would say, or I hope at least, that we need to start creating new types of products. So what happens is the dynamic, right? So in the internal company. So if I need to grow at a certain rate for my shareholders, everything that dilutes is a problem to get to get funds and resources.
Yeah.
Well, every new type of innovation, when it comes about new markets, it always starts small, so it always dilutes in the beginning. So the way the organization is designed to make money with certain margins, etc., is the biggest blocker to invent the future.
Yeah. So it's
So,
like short term and long term.
yeah,
I yesterday I heard a podcast called Land of the Giants, and it talks about the big tech giants, and they had one podcast about Amazon, and they said like the most prominent thing about Amazon when they were even like a small store, bookstore, is that Jeff Bezos said that it's all for the long run. They always see the long run and what they're doing. So maybe currently they are not that big or not that successful, or the profits is not as they thought it would be, but they're investing to the future from the beginning.
Yeah.
And you see companies doing it like, yeah, we need to think about the next quarter or the next year, more or less. And
Yeah.
therefore, all our resources are aimed to that. And if
Yeah.
you're creating something new, it's an investment. So it takes money out of your pocket, not the other
Yes.
way around at the beginning.
Exactly. Yeah. And
But
then that's, yeah, and that's at what time frame are you investing? I think that's a super relevant question, because I think we all understand that when it comes to food, there's a new wave of consumer trends and products coming, and that's the big thing. That's the next big thing to invest in, and large corporations are doing that, but also too much a bit about around acquisitions. And I feel the fast and the first mover advantage is relevant in disruptive innovations, less in incremental innovations. But if you're not the first mover in disruptive innovations, it's difficult to get a strong foothold in the market and start building it. And then you can of course acquire that company, but what's then actually what you acquire, right? Because a lot of acquisitions do not are expensive and do not meet ambitions and expectations.
sure.
Why? Because what is in the end actually that you acquire, right? Is it only a product? Is it customer base? Is it a brand? Yeah, you have a lot of people that you get. How does that work? So
Yeah.
it's challenging. Also, you have
Yeah, and in many cases, they think they get something, but in the end, it's not what they're getting. So many people leave afterwards. Many of the talents are leaving. The connection between the company and the merged startup is not working well. And sometimes they're even like pressing them down and not giving them the option to really grow in many senses, because they're
yeah.
taking the processes from their own company to
There you
what
go.
they're doing.
Yeah,
So it's not working. But
yeah.
I'm very curious to hear, like, you talk to these leaders, and I'm a vegan, so I really really want to know, is it like when they hear all these, like, the game changers and all people talking about changing their lifestyles and the way they eat, is it like resonating? Do they feel stressed, or they say, okay, that's a trend, it's okay?
No, I do think they take it seriously, and investments are really backing that up. The part is that, which is related a bit to our first topic, do we have the patience to grow it to such a large business? Because they always look, of course, when you talk about a food company, can we scale it in retail? And can we put an existing brand on it? Because if you put an existing brand on a new product and you can sell it in retail, it's basically you make it scalable in their own organization. Because when you put an existing brand, I also got access to the salespeople behind it. If there's a new brand, who is there? There's nobody. If you knock the door on a new brand, nobody opens up. So it's difficult to scale. So I
Yeah.
think the sweet spot, or whatever we try to need to figure out as corporate innovators, is okay. So how can we jump into the next wave of innovation? How can we prepare the leadership team to make investments and de-risk your portfolio in a well manner? And at the same time, we as corporate innovators need to have the reality check to really understand how does a large corporation work, because we need to make the innovation scalable within their own organization. Ideally, that's where you get easier alignment. So if I can prove we have this vegan fish product, just to name an example, it fits a brand that you already have in your portfolio, and we tested it works in retail, boom. Then
Oh,
everybody's easily, wow, we need to do this. When can we start? Then everybody wants to start it yesterday, let's say.
I
Now,
see.
what if, and that's the problem with also how we sometimes execute within the corporate innovation, is that we're not, let's say, working on a startup. We're working on a new business within a large company. And what I sometimes see in the industry is that you can create a lot of cool things, but it's not scalable within the organization. So we need to think twice if we say, look, well, this vegan fish product, it's fantastic. But then we need to be very cautious about about new brands or new types of channels. If we see there's a big opportunity to create a different business model, that automatically means that we need to manage the scaling up part very different. So
Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
has consequences that needs to be managed,
Yeah.
and that's
And
something where things sometimes derail. Yes or no?
yeah, it has consequences that they need to be aware of at the
Yes.
beginning when they start, and sometimes they are not thinking about it. And when I think about, like, it's like taking people from a startup and bringing them into a big corporate, or having a great idea and growing within a big corporate demands from them to think differently about what they're doing. And maybe in some cases they will say, okay, this vegan fish could cannibalize our current fish sales, and therefore we're not sure when it will be more profitable. Would it be that, like, would the markets take it or not, and would we be able to sell it as much?
Yeah, yeah, that's correct. And a lot of these questions we can answer, but in the end, it's also about the leadership that say, look, this is the next big thing. We find this very important, so we're going to take that step. And that's for
Mhm.
me a more entrepreneurial mindset, in the sense that we don't have to think twice that this is the next big thing. Now, who is picking it up and bringing it to the next level? And all these questions in between, how much can we sell it? Can we scale it? We can figure that one out if we do our job, right? But
Yeah,
somebody
as
needs to make that shift in their minds, like, okay, fuck it, very simple. I'm going to cook this up and we're going to make it big. And that's what you need with this type of innovation. If you don't have that strong leadership, sponsorship, there's no use to start, even, in my opinion.
And do you feel that they have these capacities to change and think differently and to grow and to have decisions that might maybe impact the companies in 5 years, not in 1 year?
Mhm. Look, in general, I think I'm positive, but it takes time. It's a journey, right? So it's not a project that you stop, finish, etc. It's really a journey with a bigger, um, let's say, change component, because basically you ask of the senior management to do two things simultaneously. Yes, execute your current business, which already has a lot of implications for the leadership team, and then also at the same time invent the future. And you cannot do both just a little bit. So sometimes people talk about a chief entrepreneur. I don't really mind the framing, but you need to have focus on inventing the future, and doing it simultaneously at the same time is just very challenging. And they call it ambidextrous, right? So that's also a whole term that is popping up in this domain.
Right.
Um, but I feel that if you want to invent the future, you need to have time, money, portfolio, leadership alignment, a clear end-to-end process, all types of things to work on. So you need to work on all these things at the same time. And
Wow.
if you are used to, let's say, work for the last 20 years and executing a large-scale business, you are basically trained to do that. And now suddenly we ask you, well, you need to look at all these small opportunities, which you most of the time miss because it's small. But how can we nurture something small to something big? That's basically what we ask from these people, to change their perspective on how to do that. Yeah, and some
Yeah.
people pick it up easier. For some people, it takes longer. But it's basically a learning process, or maybe a de-learning process, right?
Yeah, it's a de-learning.